Welcome to Behavioral Grooves. My name is Kurt Nelson.
And I'm Tim Houlihan. And today is a special grooving session on vaccine hesitancy because it's basically been a big topic in our lives. It's been an issue with one of my brother-in-laws for some time, and it's been an issue for Kurt with some pro bono work that he's been doing, and we just wanted to talk about it.
Yeah.
Hey Groovers, just a quick interruption here. We wanted to let you know that we took some of the ideas that we talk about in this episode and put them into memes for social media platforms. Now we're giving them to you for you to use with the people in your world that may be on the fence about getting vaccinated. Now links to these can be found in our episode notes, or just go to our Behavioral Grooves Facebook page or Twitter account to get them. If we all share these, maybe, just maybe, we can get a few more people to vaccinate and save someone's life. Okay, back to Kurt's comments.
So I think the idea started with some of the pro bono work that I'm doing with the Creative Coalition, which is a coalition of actors and artists and various different celebrities that work together oftentimes to promote and kind of lobby for funding for the arts and other things like this. But one of the things that they've been doing, they were asked by the CDC, is to put together some public service announcements and to look at getting some well-known celebrities to make these 30-second commercials talking about getting people to get vaccinated. And so the first one was done with Morgan Freeman, and we've been working with them on their messaging, and they're bringing all these different pieces in. But it just highlighted, for me at least, the need for this, because there are certain subgroups that have a higher vaccine hesitancy than others. African Americans, Latinos, women between the ages of 20 and 36, rural Americans, and Republicans. Republicans actually make up the largest percentage of all of those when we look across the piece. And so one of the things that we were trying to do is say, what are some of the behavioral science pieces that can help with both the messaging and these PSAs, but also just in general? And so I think what we wanted to talk about today is really looking at, we all know somebody in our family or a friend or a worker, coworker who may be on the fence, may have some hesitancy about that. And so what can you do?
Yeah. Well, let's also just be clear. We're not trying to convince anti-vaxxers that vaccines are good. We're actually just, so if that's one end of the spectrum and the opposite end of the spectrum is I've already got my vaccine, we're shooting for the middle on this, right? Okay, just to make sure. So
Yeah.
So first thought is, let's take this from Kwame Christian. Let's be compassionately curious. Let's ask questions. Let's ask them to tell us what's going on for them. What's the reluctance? Let's try to understand where they're coming from. What issues are at stake for them? What is the context in which they're troubled with the idea of getting a vaccine? So in order for us to be able to do whatever we want to do, but let's start with compassionate curiosity.
Well, and I think that helps in reducing reactance, this idea that you're trying to tell me what to do, or people are trying to tell me to get this vaccine, and there's that automatic psychological reactance that we have. And coming in with this compassionate curiosity, as Kwame talks about, is just a way of letting them tell their story. And you're not trying, at that point, you're not trying to convince them. You're trying to understand, and you're trying to listen. And people may have a really good reason. There may be some underlying health reasons. There may be some aspects of their past and what they've experienced with the medical world, or they've had really harsh reactions from other ones. And so you have to understand where people are coming from before. That's one of the caveats of behavior change, right?
Absolutely.
Is context matters, and part of that context is the world in which somebody is living within. So I think that's a fantastic piece.
And we ask that question to try to understand, why are people doing what they're doing currently?
Yeah.
Because we're not going to be able to design an intervention unless we have a decent understanding as to where they're coming from right now. What are their motivations, and what's the context, of course?
And granted, there's probably this underlying impact that we're thinking about this to try to get them to change their opinion. But you really need to go in with this compassion and this idea that this isn't this trick that I'm going to use in order to then use it against you, because people will see through that. But be genuine with that compassion and be genuine with the curiosity. Really be a positive way of getting people to at least examine their own beliefs, because oftentimes they hold beliefs. I do it all the time, and I don't really fully understand my rationale behind it. And when that gets put into the light, and then if you ask questions about it, I might re-examine that. So I think that's the a really good point there, Tim.
Okay, the second thing that we want to talk about is to leverage the right messenger and the right proof statements. And this we take from the really great work that Steve Martin and Joe Marks did on the messenger effect. But it's important to start thinking about framing your the things that you're going to share with this person who is on the fence, coming from their perspective, right? So if we go back to Kurt's list, right, we've got the primary groups that are concerned, that have high concerns, are Latinx, Blacks, Republicans, and then people in rural areas. The message is likely to be different for each of them.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that in a minute, but certainly start thinking about where they're coming from, and that might not just be a political thing, but it could also be a social thing. It might have to do with the family. Maybe you have a sister who is a nurse or a doctor, who could act as a both a social force and sort of an identifiable authority in the area. There might be a community person. There might be a church pastor or an imam or a rabbi who is a leader that this person respects, or a coach. Mm-hmm. Could be someone who could be an authority figure who might actually be also a social figure as well.
And I think there's really good points there. And so make sure that person that you either can tap into and bring some of the what they're thinking or what they've said as part of their reference group, as you were talking about, right? So if you are working with somebody who is Latino, try to find somebody who is going to be an authority figure and reference for that group and bring that in. Rob Willer, who is a professor at Stanford University, I had a conversation with him around this. And one of the things that he talks about is, particularly with Republicans and some of the Republican hesitancy that is going on, is that if you can point to some of the Republican elite who haven't necessarily come out in positive of this, but they definitely are not negative on this from a vaccine perspective. And if you can point to them as actually proof statements that, look, President Trump actually has gotten his vaccine.
Right.
Ted Cruz, Trump, who is a younger person, Ted Cruz. You can point to people who have gotten this. Actually, Trump at the with the CPAC said, go out and get your vaccine, and so use that message, bring that message in. Trump said to go get your vaccine. He's calling it the Trumpcine because he was the one who was doing it. Bring right. those points of message into the conversation, because right. that's who they're looking up to, and that's who, if you can get and point to that message, because that message just hasn't been promulgated out there. And I think those are some key pieces of this.
And just don't miss the opportunity to go away from the political side, because there might be a social or community or family member or some other tribal group that we identify with, that this person might be identifying with, that you're trying to persuade, that could be important. So just keep that in mind.
I think the third piece that we wanted to talk about are just some of the messages. And so this is really, again, some of the work is from Rob Willer and his group out at Stanford. And some of this is actually also from Frank Luntz, who is a political pollster who actually does a lot of work from the Republican side. But one of the messages is this idea that, hey, more people are actually not vaccine hesitant, that they're getting the vaccine or that they're wanting to get the vaccine. And there can be some misunderstanding, particularly given what the media focuses in on, that, oh, everybody's vaccine hesitant. And if you can provide some of those social proof that says, hey, look, the vast majority of Americans, or the vast majority of African Americans, or the vast majority of Republicans, even, if you can get down to that reference group to say they are actually getting the vaccine and want to get the vaccine, that's a different, it can help in encouraging some people to rethink their perceptions on that.
Yeah, this is something that I think Cialdini studied on, was it the Redwood Forest, where the signs used to say, hey, a lot of people are stealing the wood, the precious wood, petrified forest. Yeah. Thank you, the petrified forest. A lot of people are stealing petrified rocks, and that's a bad thing. That message was not an effective message at reducing the number of thefts of petrified wood. What changed is when they turned it around and said, almost nobody steals from this, everybody who comes into the park, almost everybody is really good. And you should be part of the really good group.
Yeah. And I think Willer referenced this study by Moring, Collis, Garmilia, Rahimian, Arrow, and Eccles that had like 430,000 participants in it. Basically, it was this idea of surfacing norms to increase vaccine acceptancy and saying, look, when we increase that understanding, that's a 5+% increase in people's willingness to get vaccinated. So again, it's a 5%, but 5% is 5%. So I think that's a big thing. The piece from Frank Luntz, which is really interesting, and he said in polling the work that he was doing, the message that was most resonating across the board, this means in every demographic, was this concept of removing, if you get the shot, that means we're all going to be able to remove our masks. If everybody gets their shot, then we can take our masks off and we can have those community gatherings in the park or in your house. You can have people over for Christmas. You can go to a baseball game and not have to wear a mask. You can go to a basketball game, not have to wear a mask. This idea of taking that mask off, particularly, was resonant across the board, but it was the one that it was probably the only good message that Frank found from the ones that he tested with Republicans on that thing. So again, if you're dealing with somebody from that in that tribe, that might be a way of talking to them and using that message for that.
So take a shot, take off your mask was a pretty powerful message. Kurt, you've also been working again on these PSAs. What other messages are strong in the way that you guys are developing these? Yeah.
So again, taking a element from Katie Milkman, where she did some research on flu vaccines, and the message from the flu vaccines that worked best was your shot is waiting for you, and personalizing that message. So again, however you can personalize that, so it's not this random shot that is out there, but it's your COVID-19 shot. It's, you know what, they have it reserved for you. It's there. Go ahead and take it. They've built this specifically around you. So those are some of the messages that at least from our perspective and the research so far have been shown to be effective. Now, obviously, all of this starts, as Tim talked about at the very beginning, with this compassionate curiosity. And I think that would be if you start with anything, start with that. Think about who the messenger and who can you bring into the conversation as this proof statement. And then finally, these are just some suggestions on some of the messages. And again, this isn't going to work with huge people who are just anti-vax, and sometimes you just want to give up on those. Don't give up on them. Be compassionately curious with them. But these other messages and the leveraging who the messenger is, those can actually have some powerful impacts on maybe people who are on the fence. So hopefully that's helpful. Hopefully you can take some of this information and apply it, and then we'll be able to all take our masks off much sooner if we can get everybody to take their shot, and we can go back to a world that we can hug each other and be together in a better place.
So thanks for listening. And this week, we hope you go out and find your groove.